At the heart of the heat and anger around transgender policies and politics are people, individuals, often young, often confused, often in need of help as they struggle with their identities at a very vulnerable stage of their lives. One of those individuals, one of those vulnerable young people, was Alice Litman, who took her own life in May last year, aged 20. Alice was assigned male at birth, but in her late teens sought to transition and looked for what's known as gender-affirming healthcare. After a suicide attempt, she was referred to child and adolescent mental health services, but when she turned 18, that assistance ended. The inquest into her death has just completed. Kate is Alice's sister. I asked her first to tell us about her sister.
She was delightful. I remember telling her bedtime stories when she was little, and she would just giggle and giggle. She was really caring, really kind, and she kind of had a knack for welcoming people into situations and making them feel comfortable, and just a really, really caring person.
When did she start questioning her gender identity, and how did that sort of manifest itself? Did she talk with you about it? Were you talking with her family about it? What happened?
She told me in 2018, so she was 16 at that point, that she felt that she was a woman. And I think she'd shared it a bit with a few of her friends before coming to me. She felt very confident in her identity, and she knew that that was how she wanted to live her life.
At the time, did she seem, use the word confident, but was she happy about it? Did she find it a difficult process?
No, she was really happy about it. I think it's really notable that whenever Alice felt that she was making forward progress with her transition, that's when she was her happiest. And she was so happy when she came out to the broader family and started going by the name Alice. And we had a little tea party for her to sort of welcome her to the family. And she bleached her hair and she started wearing women's clothes. And there was always this sense of momentum and forward movement and excitement, and then she would come up against some barrier, and that's what would make her feel despondent, and she would sort of retreat, and the happiness was always quite brief.
Now, for you, as I understand it, there are two very deep causes of concern. The first is that she received assistance for mental health before she turned 18 from child and adolescent mental health services, and then when she turned 18, it sort of fell off a cliff. Is that right?
Yes, she was discharged when she turned 18, even though she'd had quite a recent serious suicide attempt. When you've just been turned away again and again and told this service isn't for you, or you'll have to wait several years for this service, she just lost hope. She didn't feel like it was somewhere she could go. And the mental health care that she had, often people didn't really accept her gender identity, so she didn't feel like that was going to be meaningful support. She was consistently misgendered by medical staff in their own notes, or people would use different pronouns within the same sentence and use different names within the same sentence. And I think that just speaks to the complete lack of understanding by mental health professionals.
But once she was 18, there was nowhere for her to turn? Her GP or someone like that?
The first time she went to the GP, he told her to go and play more football. She went to the GP again to discuss her gender identity, and they said, let's just sit and wait and see what happens. So she wasn't referred to gender identity services for another year after that. And there's only so many times someone with poor mental health and poor resilience can be pushed back and told, this isn't for you.
Your second sort of cause of concern institutionally is about the time it was taking and would have taken for her to get what's called gender-affirming care. What was the timescale?
So at the time she died, she'd been on the waiting list for 1,023 days. So that's almost 3 years. Currently, the Gender Identity Clinic are seeing people who were referred 5 years ago, but that's no guarantee that Alice would have got an appointment in 5 years because the waiting lists are growing exponentially. And I think something that came out of the inquest that's really important is that if someone was referred today, with the size of the wait list and the rate at which they're seeing new patients, it would take 20 years to be seen. So the services just cannot keep up with the growing demand.
And the coroner went out of its way to point this up as well, the fact that the demand for services is just wildly outstripping supply.
Yeah.
As you will be very aware, this is a controversial topic. It's got caught up in all kinds of arguments and so-called culture wars. You got onto the receiving end of that controversy, you and your family.
Yeah, I find it really shocking that even in news stories about someone's death and tweets and posts being shared by her family members, I'm still the subject of really vile and vicious hate and, you know, disparaging comments about Alice's appearance and how she wasn't a woman, she's a man. I've said the wait lists are responsible for her death. It seems that they're doing their job then. It's a good thing she died. A real range of comments and just joking, just laughing about it. You know, people will just reply to a tweet about Alice dying. Ha 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 ha. So pretty vile stuff, really.
You must have thought about this an awful lot. Do you know how we got to a situation where a vulnerable teenager and her death is treated like this?
I just find it so hard to understand. I find it incomprehensible. I'm really hoping that Alice's death will reach through to some people who are sort of more in the middle and more undecided, and that these people just represent a really small minority, because I can't let myself believe that a significant proportion of people can be that hateful.
I mean, is that why you're here today? What is it that you want to improve after Alice's death?
I want people to see that Alice was just a normal 20-year-old woman, that she wasn't a predator, that she wasn't trying to force her way into women's spaces, that the real transgender people who we're talking about are often vulnerable young people who are desperate to access healthcare and who are at real risk of not just poor mental health, but assault and abuse, and to try and humanise the debate and make people sort of shift their perspective.
That was Kate Litman. Both the Surrey and Bordners Partnership NHS Foundation Trust and the Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation Trust declined to comment before the coroner hands down their full verdict.